Commander Zethkar stood on the bridge of his massive warship and looked at the blue planet ahead. His three eyes studied the data on his screen. This was supposed to be easy. The scans showed a simple world with basic technology. The creatures living there had only just learned to leave their planet. They had small ships and weak weapons, perfect for conquest. Zethkar had done this many times before. The Velthari Empire had taken over 47 worlds in the past century. Every time was the same. They arrived with their huge ships and advanced weapons. The local species either ran away in fear or gave up immediately. Some tried to fight, but never lasted more than a few hours. After that came the mining operations and slave labor, simple and profitable. He touched the communication device on his neck. Irixtal, begin the standard approach. Send the surrender message in their primitive language. His second-in-command nodded his scaled head. Yes, Commander. The translation. Computers have learned their speech patterns. Sending message now! Zethkar watched as a small human ship appeared on his sensors. It was tiny compared to his cruiser. The human vessel was maybe 1% the size of his warship. Its weapons were laughably weak. Its armor was thin metal that his guns could cut through like paper. He almost felt bad for the creatures inside. The human ship moved toward them. Zethkar expected it to stop and wait for instructions. Instead, it kept coming. The communications officer spoke up. Commander, we are receiving a message from the human vessel. Put it through. A rough voice came through the speakers. The translation was crude, but clear enough. Unknown ship, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Ship Defiant. You are in restricted space. State your purpose or leave immediately. Zethkar blinked his three eyes in surprise. No species had ever demanded that the Velthari state their purpose. He looked at Irixtal, who seemed equally confused. The weapons specialist Krelthos made a clicking sound that meant amusement. Did this primitive just give us orders? Krelthos asked. Zethkar touched his communicator again. Human vessel, I am Commander Zethkar of the Velthari Empire. Your world now belongs to us. Surrender immediately and your death will be quick. There was silence for a long moment. Then the human voice came back. Like hell it does. All ships, attack pattern Alpha. Take out their weapon systems. Before Zethkar could react, more human ships appeared from behind the planet's moon. They were all small and weak-looking, but there were dozens of them. They flew straight at his massive cruiser without any sign of fear. Impossible, Irixtal muttered. They should be running away. The human ships opened fire with their primitive weapons. The energy beams bounced off the Velthari shields like raindrops. Krelthos laughed and fired back. His first shot destroyed 3 human ships. Instantly, the explosion was bright against the black space, but the other humans did not retreat. They kept coming. They flew in patterns that made no sense to Zethkar. Instead of attacking in formation like proper military forces, they seemed to be attacking randomly. Some ships dove straight down while others looped around. Some flew so close to his cruiser that they almost crashed into it. What are they doing? Irixtal asked. This is not how space combat works. Zethkar was starting to feel uneasy. In all his years of conquest, he had never seen anything like this. The humans were clearly losing. They had lost half their ships already, but they kept fighting with the same intensity as when they started. Then something happened that made Zethkar's blood run cold. The lead human ship, the one called Defiant, was badly damaged. Smoke poured from its hull and one engine was dead. Any reasonable commander would retreat or surrender at this point. Instead, Captain Jake Morrison did something that Zethkar would remember for the rest of his life. The damaged human ship turned directly toward the Velthari cruiser and accelerated. To maximum speed! He is going to ram us, Krelthos said in disbelief. The mad creature is going to ram us. Impossible, Zethkar replied. No species commits suicide for no reason. He will turn away at the last second. But Jake Morrison did not turn away. The Defiant struck the Velthari cruiser's main weapon array at full speed. The explosion was massive. Both ships were caught. In the blast, Zethkar felt his cruiser shaking apart around him as they fell toward the planet below. As his ship crashed through the atmosphere, Zethkar realized something terrible. These humans were not like any species he had encountered before. They did not run when they should run. They did not surrender when they should surrender. They were willing to die to hurt their enemies. The last thing he saw before the crash was Jake Morrison's ship burning up in the atmosphere beside them. The human captain had sacrificed himself and his crew just to damage the Velthari weapon systems. It made no logical sense. As consciousness faded, Zethkar wondered what kind of creatures they were about to face on the surface below. Zethkar woke up to the sound of his ship burning. Twisted metal and sparking electronics surrounded him. His head hurt, and purple blood dripped from a cut on his forehead. He pushed himself up and looked around the wreckage of his bridge. Rixtal was pulling injured crew members from under fallen debris. Krelthos was checking their weapons and ammunition. Most of the bridge crew had survived the crash, but many were hurt. Their ship was completely destroyed. The main engines were dead, and the hull was cracked in dozens of places. "Status report," Zethkar commanded as he stood on unsteady legs. 43 crew members alive, Irixtal reported. 15 seriously injured. All main systems are offline. We have small arms and portable equipment only. Krelthos looked up from his weapon check. The humans crashed about 2 kilometers east of here. Their ship is also destroyed, but I detected movement in the wreckage. Zethkar moved to what was left of the main window and looked outside. They had crashed in a dense forest. Tall trees stretched in every direction. The air smelled of burning fuel and smoke. This was not the easy conquest he had planned. "How many humans survived?" he asked. "Unknown. Possibly 8 to 12 based on the ship size," Zethkar calculated quickly. Even injured, his warriors were stronger and better armed than humans. 43 Velthari against maybe 12 humans should be an easy victory. But he remembered the ramming attack and felt uneasy. "Set up a defensive perimeter," he ordered. "Treat the wounded and prepare for contact with enemy survivors." His troops moved efficiently despite their injuries. Within an hour, they had established a secure area around the crash site. Sensors were placed to detect movement. Weapons were cleaned and checked. The wounded were given medical attention. Then, the attacks began. The first incident happened when Velthari scout Grixnal went to gather water from a nearby stream. He simply disappeared. One moment he was walking toward the water, and the next moment he was gone. The only sign was his rifle lying on the ground and some disturbed earth. Krelthos led a search team to investigate. They found Grixnal hanging upside down from a tree branch with a primitive rope around his ankle. He was unconscious, but alive. The trap had been made from materials that were lying around the forest. Branches, vines, and stones arranged in a way that triggered when stepped on. Clever, Krelthos admitted grudgingly, but still primitive. The second attack came at sunset. Velthari warrior Thekros was on guard duty when something small hit him in the neck. He pulled out what looked like a sharpened stick with feathers on one end. Poison from local plants had been smeared on the tip. Within minutes, he was paralyzed. Zethkar examined the primitive arrow. "They are using local materials as weapons. How did they learn to do this so quickly?" "Perhaps they studied their environment before we arrived," Irixtal suggested. But Zethkar knew that was impossible. The humans had crashed at the same time they did. There was no way they could have prepared these traps in advance. Somehow they were adapting to their situation faster than should be possible. On the third day, Krelthos decided to hunt down the humans directly. He took 5 warriors and advanced toward the human crash site. They moved carefully with full military discipline. Their advanced armor should protect them from primitive weapons. Their energy rifles could cut through trees and rocks. They never reached the human position. The attack came from above and below at the same time. Humans dropped from tree branches while others burst out of holes in the ground. They threw crude spears and swung heavy clubs. None of their weapons should have been able to hurt Velthari armor. But the humans had learned. They aimed for joints and weak spots. They used their environment as a weapon. One human named Amy Foster had somehow turned medical supplies into small explosive devices. When they went off, they damaged armor and confused the Velthari warriors. Another human called Ray Campbell used nothing but a long stick with a sharpened stone tied to one end. He moved faster than any human should be able to move. His attacks were precise and coordinated. He seemed to know exactly where Velthari armor was weakest. Krelthos and his team retreated after losing 2 warriors. The weapons specialist was bleeding from several wounds and his pride was badly damaged. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "They are primitives with sticks and stones." Zethkar was asking himself the same question. Every military doctrine said that superior technology should win easily against primitive weapons, but the humans were not fighting like primitives. They were fighting like creatures who had been born for war. That night, while treating wounded warriors, he noticed something else strange. The humans had not tried to escape. Any logical species would use hit-and-run tactics to wear down the enemy, then retreat to safety. Instead, the humans seemed to be actively hunting his troops. During the 4th night, human pilot Lisa Carter managed to sneak into their perimeter. She moved through their sensor network without being detected. She planted small explosive devices near their ammunition supplies before disappearing back into the forest. The explosions woke everyone and started fires that took hours to put out. More importantly, they lost half their remaining ammunition. Now the Velthari were running low on both weapons and medical supplies. Zethkar realized with growing horror that the humans were not just surviving, they were winning. His technologically superior force was being defeated by creatures using tools they had made from forest materials. Worse than that, the humans seemed to be enjoying themselves. When his scouts reported on human positions, they described creatures who moved with confidence and purpose. There was no fear in their actions, no desperation. They fought like predators who had found perfect prey. As he looked at his depleted forces, Zethkar understood that everything he thought he knew about warfare was wrong. Technology meant nothing if your enemy refused to follow the rules. Superior numbers meant nothing if your enemy was willing to sacrifice everything for victory. The humans were teaching him a lesson that would change how he saw the universe forever. On the 7th day, Zethkar finally managed to capture a human. It happened during what should have been a routine patrol. Communications officer Tony Walsh had been trying to reach the wreckage of some human equipment when Velthari scouts surrounded him. Instead of fighting to the death like the others, he surrendered. Zethkar studied the human prisoner carefully. Tony was smaller than a Velthari warrior and had no natural weapons like claws or fangs. His skin was soft and easily damaged. He looked weak and fragile. Yet this species had been defeating superior forces for over a week. "Why do you not fear?" "Us?" Zethkar asked through the translation device. Tony Walsh looked up at him with calm eyes. "Fear you? We crashed a spaceship into your spaceship. You really think we're afraid of anything?" The response puzzled Zethkar. "Your species should submit to superior force. This is natural law throughout the galaxy." "Maybe for your galaxy," Tony replied. "But you've never met humans before." Zethkar decided to learn more about these strange creatures. Over the next several hours, he questioned Tony about human history and culture. What he learned filled him with growing unease. Humans had been fighting wars for thousands of years, not just against other species, but against each other. They had developed weapons and tactics through constant conflict. Their entire civilization was built on competition and struggle. "You fight your own kind?" Zethkar asked in disbelief. "All the time," Tony said casually. We've had 2 world wars where millions died. Countless smaller wars before and after. We fight over land, resources, ideas, religion. Sometimes we fight just because we don't like each other. This was incomprehensible to Zethkar. The Velthari had evolved on a world where cooperation was necessary for survival. They fought other species, but never their own kind. The idea of deliberately harming members of your own species was deeply disturbing. But why? He asked. Tony shrugged. Because we're good at it. Humans are natural predators. We evolved by outcompeting everything else on our planet. Every other species either learned to run from us or went extinct. As Tony continued talking, Zethkar learned about human military history. They had invented countless ways to kill each other. Swords, guns, bombs, poison gas, nuclear weapons. They studied warfare like other species studied art or science. We have a saying, Tony explained. If you want peace, prepare for war. We've been preparing for war for our entire history. That night, while Tony was secured in an improvised prison, Amy Foster proved his point. The human medic managed to get close enough to Krelthos to inject him with something she had made from local plants. The injection did not kill him, but it made him very sick. His vision blurred, and his coordination failed. While Krelthos was helpless, Amy took his weapons and ammunition. She also stole their remaining medical supplies before disappearing back into the forest. The attack was surgical in its precision. She had identified the most dangerous target and neutralized him, without killing anyone. She is a healer, Irixtal said in confusion. Why does she fight like a warrior? Zethkar was beginning to understand. Because to humans there is no difference. They are all warriors. The next day brought worse news. Ray Campbell, an engineer, Ben Rodriguez had somehow managed to repair parts of their crashed ship. They had salvaged power cells and communication equipment. Worse yet, they were trying to contact other humans on the planet. Krelthos, still weak from the injection, led an attack on the human position. But the humans had learned from their previous encounters. They had built better defenses and more sophisticated traps. The Velthari assault failed completely. During the retreat, Ben Rodriguez demonstrated something that made Zethkar's blood run cold. The human engineer had somehow modified a Velthari energy rifle that had been lost in an earlier fight. Not only was it working again, but it was more powerful than before. How is this possible? Irixtal demanded. They should not understand our technology, but they did understand it. Somehow these primitive creatures were learning Velthari science through observation and experimentation. They were not just using captured weapons, they were improving them. That evening, Zethkar questioned Tony again. How do your people learn so quickly? Because we have to, Tony replied. Humans who don't adapt die. It's been that way for millions of years. We're really good at figuring things out when our lives depend on it. But you are primitives. You have barely learned to travel between planets. Tony laughed. Primitive? We split the atom 70 years after we learned to fly. We went from horse-drawn carts to space travel in 1 century. We might not have your technology, but we learn fast. Zethkar was starting to realize the scope of his mistake. The Velthari had always conquered species that were either more advanced but peaceful, or primitive but simple. Humans were primitive in technology, but advanced in warfare. They combined the desperation of a cornered animal with the intelligence of a sophisticated predator. On the 10th day, pilot Lisa Carter launched an attack that changed everything. She had somehow gotten hold of explosives from the Velthari crash site. Instead of using them randomly, she planned a coordinated assault on their defensive positions. The attack came at dawn when most of the Velthari were sleeping. Lisa had studied their routines and identified their weaknesses. The explosions were precisely timed to cause maximum confusion and minimum actual damage. She wanted to capture equipment, not destroy it. During the chaos, Ray Campbell and Ben Rodriguez struck the ammunition depot. They moved through the Velthari defenses like ghosts. By the time the aliens realized what was happening, the humans had stolen most of their remaining weapons and supplies. Amy Foster provided cover by setting up false targets that drew Velthari fire away from the real attackers. Her medical knowledge let her predict how the aliens would react to injuries and stress. When it was over, Zethkar found himself with less than 20 functional warriors and almost no supplies. The humans had turned the tables completely. Now, the Velthari were the ones fighting for survival. Looking at Tony Walsh in his makeshift prison, Zethkar asked the question that had been haunting him. "What kind of creatures are you?" Tony smiled grimly. "We're the kind that survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and every natural disaster our planet could throw at us. We're the kind that turned our entire world into our hunting ground. And now, you've given us a reason to expand that hunting ground to the stars." The morning sky darkened with the shadows of massive ships. Admiral Thexron had arrived with the full invasion fleet. Hundreds of Velthari warships descended from orbit like hungry predators. Their weapons could level mountains, and their shields could withstand nuclear explosions. This should have been the end of human resistance. Zethkar felt relief wash over him as he watched the fleet approach. Soon this nightmare would be over. The humans had been clever and resourceful, but they could not fight an entire armada with sticks and stolen rifles. Finally, Irixtal said weakly. He had been wounded in the latest human attack and was barely able to stand. Now these creatures will learn what real power looks like. But as the invasion fleet spread across the planet, something unexpected happened. Instead of surrendering or fleeing in panic, the humans began coordinating. Radio signals crackled across every frequency as human settlements worldwide received the same message that Ray Campbell was broadcasting from his improvised communication system. "This is Captain Jake Morrison's final order," the message repeated. "All units, all civilians, all humans everywhere. They want our world. Make them pay for every inch." Zethkar watched in growing horror as cities across the planet responded to the call. Instead of becoming refugee centers, they transformed into fortress complexes. Instead of civilians fleeing, they took up arms and prepared for siege warfare. "Admiral." Thexron's voice came through the communication system with confident authority. "Commander Zethkar, maintain your position. This rabble will be pacified within hours." The first Velthari landing forces touched down near major human population centers. These were elite troops with the best equipment and training. They had conquered dozens of worlds using proven tactics, drop overwhelming force at key locations, eliminate leadership, and accept surrender from the demoralized population. But something went wrong immediately. The humans did not behave like other conquered species. Instead of leadership centers, the Velthari found empty buildings wired with explosives. Instead of military formations, they found ordinary citizens with hunting rifles and homemade bombs. Human teacher named Dan Murphy used his knowledge of chemistry to create poison gas from cleaning supplies. A mechanic called Steve Johnson turned his garage into a weapons factory, producing crude but effective explosive devices. Everywhere the Velthari landed, they found enemies who should not have existed. How are they organized without central command? Admiral Thexran demanded over the radio. "We destroyed their government buildings and military bases first." Tony Walsh, still imprisoned but listening to the communications, laughed bitterly. "You don't understand humans at all. We don't need orders to fight, we just need a reason." Through captured Velthari equipment, Security Chief Ray Campbell was somehow coordinating resistance across the entire planet. He had no formal authority and no traditional military structure, yet human forces were responding to his suggestions, as if they were trained soldiers following orders. Zethkar realized that the humans were using something the Velthari had never encountered. Instead of top-down command structures, they had bottom-up cooperation. Every human seemed to understand what needed to be done without being told. The reports from the invasion fleet grew more disturbing by the hour. In New York, Humans had turned skyscrapers into vertical battlefields. Each floor was a separate fortress connected by hidden passages. Velthari troops found themselves fighting room by room against enemies who knew every inch of the terrain. In London, the entire subway system had become a network of tunnels and bunkers. Humans appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking at Velthari forces, then vanishing underground before retaliation was possible. In Tokyo, civilian engineers had somehow managed to modify industrial equipment into massive weapons. Construction. Cranes became artillery pieces, bulldozers became armored vehicles. Even garbage trucks had been turned into mobile missile platforms. "This is impossible," Admiral Thexran's voice was strained. "Civilians cannot fight trained military forces." But they were fighting. More than that, they were winning. Velthari. Casualties mounted as human resistance intensified. Every street became a battlefield. Every building became a fortress. Every human civilian became a potential enemy combatant. Amy Foster had escaped during the confusion of the invasion and rejoined her team. Using her medical knowledge, she began teaching other humans how to exploit Velthari biology. She identified weak points in their anatomy and distributed the information through Ray Campbell's communication network. Soon, humans everywhere knew exactly where to strike for maximum effect. Kitchen knives became surgical instruments of war. Baseball bats became precisely targeted weapons. Even children learned how to hurt creatures 10 times their size. Ben Rodriguez had completed his work reverse engineering Velthari technology. Not only had he figured out how their weapons worked, he had improved the design. Human factories that had been making cars and computers began producing energy rifles that were more efficient than the originals. They are learning faster than "We can adapt," Krelthos reported during one of his scouting missions. "Every tactic we use, they develop a counter-tactic within hours." Lisa Carter had somehow managed to repair a Velthari shuttle and was using it to coordinate air support for ground forces. She flew like she had been born in that cockpit, pushing the alien technology beyond its design limits. The most disturbing reports came from Admiral Thexran himself. "Commander, these creatures are not just fighting back. They are enjoying it. Our psychological warfare specialists report that human stress levels actually decrease during combat. They become calmer and more focused when shooting at us." Zethkar felt ice in his veins as he processed this information. Every species the Velthari had conquered showed signs of trauma and fear during battle. Stress hormones increased, decision-making became impaired. Eventually, they broke under pressure. Humans seemed to work the opposite way. Combat made them sharper, violence made them more intelligent. The longer the fighting continued, the more dangerous they became. "Tony," Zethkar called to his prisoner, "why do your people become stronger during war?" The human communications officer looked up with eyes that held no fear despite everything that had happened. "Because war is what we do best. Every human alive is descended from survivors of thousands of wars. Fighting is literally in our blood." As night fell and the sounds of battle echoed from around the globe, Zethkar began to understand the true horror of what they had encountered. The Velthari had not invaded a primitive world. They had invaded a planet full of natural-born killers who had been waiting their entire history for exactly this moment. The age of easy conquest was over. Admiral Thexran's patience had reached its limit. 3 days of fighting had cost him nearly half his invasion force. Velthari warriors who had conquered entire star systems were being defeated by creatures using primitive weapons and captured equipment. The situation was becoming an embarrassment to the entire empire. "Prepare the pacification protocol," he ordered from his flagship in orbit. "If these animals will not submit to reason, we will make them submit to science." Zethkar felt his stomach twist when he heard those words over the communication system. The pacification protocol was a biological weapon designed to alter brain chemistry in hostile populations. It had been used on 3 previous worlds where local resistance was too strong for conventional conquest. The weapon released airborne compounds that affected the nervous system of most carbon-based life forms. Exposed creatures became docile and suggestible. They lost the ability to feel anger or aggression. Within hours, entire planets would surrender peacefully and accept Velthari rule without question. "Sir," Zethkar spoke into his communicator, "perhaps we should study these humans more before using biological weapons. They have shown unusual adaptability." "Enough," Admiral Thexran snapped back. "I will not lose an entire fleet to primitives with sharp sticks. The weapon deploys in 1 hour." Tony Walsh had been listening to the conversation through the translation device. His face went pale when he understood what was about to happen. "You're going to use biological weapons on civilians? It will not harm them," Zethkar explained. "They will simply become peaceful and cooperative, much better than the alternative." "You don't understand," Tony said urgently. "Human brain chemistry is different from other species. We evolved on a world with complex plant toxins and natural drugs. Our nervous system has built-in resistance to chemical interference." Zethkar dismissed this concern. The pacification protocol had worked on every species they had encountered. There was no reason to think humans would be different. The weapon deployment began at dawn. Massive dispensers on the Velthari ships released clouds of invisible compounds into the atmosphere. The chemicals spread quickly through air currents and weather patterns. Within 6 hours, the entire planet would be covered. At first, the results seemed promising. Radio communications from human resistance forces became less frequent. The constant attacks on Velthari positions slowed down. Admiral Thexran began planning the next phase of occupation, but then something unexpected happened. Dr. Paul Chen, a human scientist who had been working with the resistance, managed to analyze samples of the biological weapon using captured Velthari equipment. His findings were immediately broadcast to human forces worldwide. "The compound is designed to suppress aggression centers in the brain." His voice crackled over Ray Campbell's communication network. "But human neurology is more complex than they realize. Instead of making us docile, it's having the opposite effect." Zethkar listened in growing alarm as Dr. Paul Chen explained what was happening. The Velthari weapon was interacting with human brain chemistry in ways that had never been seen before. Instead of suppressing aggression, it was enhancing focus and eliminating fear responses. Humans who had been exposed to the biological agent were not becoming peaceful. They were becoming more dangerous. The chemical was acting like a performance-enhancing drug that made humans better at everything they did, especially fighting. Kate Williams, a researcher working with Dr. Paul Chen, confirmed the analysis. "It's like the compound is unlocking parts of our brain that are normally suppressed. Pattern recognition is enhanced. Reaction time is improved. Pain sensitivity is reduced." The evidence of this enhancement became obvious within hours. Human fighters who had been exposed to the weapon began displaying abilities that should have been impossible. Their accuracy with weapons improved dramatically. Their tactical thinking became more sophisticated. Their endurance in combat increased beyond normal human limits. Dan Murphy, the school teacher who had been making chemical weapons, suddenly began creating compounds that were far more advanced than anything he should have been able to produce. His knowledge of chemistry seemed to expand exponentially after exposure to the Velthari biological agent. Steve Johnson, the mechanic, began building weapons and equipment that rivaled Velthari technology. He was working with materials he had never seen before, yet somehow understood their properties intuitively. Most disturbing of all, the humans began coordinating their efforts with a level of efficiency that seemed almost telepathic. Ray Campbell found that he could predict what other human forces would do before they reported their intentions. Lisa Carter began flying combat patterns that perfectly complemented ground operations she had no direct communication with. "What have we done?" Admiral Thexran whispered over the communication channel as reports flooded in from around the planet. The enhanced humans were not just fighting better, they were fighting smarter. They began capturing Velthari equipment systematically and reverse engineering it at an incredible pace. Ben Rodriguez, working with newly enhanced human engineers, managed to crack the encryption on Velthari computer systems. Within 12 hours of exposure to the biological weapon, humans had access to complete technical specifications for Velthari ships, weapons, and defensive systems. They knew everything about their enemy's capabilities and weaknesses. Amy Foster used her enhanced medical knowledge to develop targeted toxins that affected Velthari biology specifically. She created compounds that could paralyze Velthari nervous systems while leaving humans completely unaffected. The tide of battle turned completely. Velthari forces that had been slowly advancing found themselves under attack from enemies who seemed to know their every move before they made it. Human fighters anticipated Velthari tactics and had countermeasures ready before the aliens could implement their strategies. "They are reading our tactical databases in real time," Krelthos reported during a panicked communication from his scattered forces. "Every plan we make, they already have a response prepared." Tony Walsh, still imprisoned but watching the transformation of his species, tried to explain what was happening. "You gave us a drug that unlocks human potential. Do you have any idea what we're capable of when all our limitations are removed?" Zethkar was beginning to understand. Humans had evolved on a world where intelligence and adaptability were necessary for survival. Their brains had vast unused capacity that was normally suppressed by biological safety mechanisms. The Velthari weapon had removed those safety mechanisms. "We have created super soldiers," he said in horror. "No," Tony corrected him. "You've created what humans were always meant to be. You just removed the biological limits that kept us from reaching our full potential." The reports from Admiral Thexran grew more desperate by the hour. Human forces were not just defending their planet anymore. They were beginning offensive operations against Velthari positions in orbit. Using captured shuttles and modified equipment, they were taking the fight directly to the invasion fleet. Enhanced human pilots like Lisa Carter were outflying Velthari aces who had decades of experience. Enhanced engineers like Ben Rodriguez were building spacecraft that outperformed vessels designed by the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. As the sun set on the 5th day since the biological weapon deployment, Zethkar realized they had made a fatal mistake. They had tried to pacify humanity and instead had created something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. The enhanced humans were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for dominance. And they were winning. Admiral Thexran stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at the tactical display with growing desperation. Red warning lights indicated Velthari ships under attack or destroyed. Blue markers showed human forces advancing on multiple fronts. In less than a week, the most powerful invasion fleet in the Empire's history was facing complete defeat at the hands of a primitive species. "Sir," his communications officer reported with a trembling voice, "the humans have captured 3 more cruisers. They are using our own ships against us. The enhanced humans were not just stealing Velthari technology, they were improving it. Ben Rodriguez and his team of supercharged engineers had figured out how to increase power output and efficiency in captured alien vessels. Human ships were now faster and more powerful than the originals." Lisa Carter led a squadron of modified Velthari fighters in a coordinated assault on the fleet's defensive perimeter. Her enhanced reflexes and tactical awareness made her nearly impossible to target. She flew through missile swarms and energy barrages like they were gentle rain. On the planet's surface, Ray Campbell coordinated ground-to-space attacks using captured orbital weapons. His enhanced strategic thinking allowed him to predict fleet movements and position his forces for maximum effect. Every Velthari ship that entered low orbit found itself under immediate and precise attack. Admiral Thexran made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He activated the planetary sterilization protocol. If the humans could not be conquered, they would be eliminated completely. Better to destroy the planet than allow these enhanced creatures to spread beyond their world. Charging the primary. "Weapon," his weapons officer announced. "Planet Killer will be ready to fire in 30 minutes. The massive weapon at the heart of the flagship began drawing power from the ship's core. When fired, it would crack the planet's crust and trigger geological disasters that would eliminate all life on the surface. No species could survive planetary sterilization, not even enhanced humans. Down on the surface, Zethkar heard the announcement through his communicator. He looked at Tony Walsh, who had been listening to every development through the translation device. The human's enhanced intelligence had already processed the implications. "Your admiral is going to destroy the entire planet," Tony said calmly. "He would rather commit genocide than accept defeat." Zethkar felt something break inside his mind as he realized what was about to happen. The Velthari Empire prided itself on conquest and expansion. They took resources and enslaved populations, but they did not destroy entire worlds. That was wasteful and pointless. But these humans had changed everything. They had turned conquest into a nightmare and victory into defeat. They had forced the proud Velthari to consider complete destruction rather than face the consequences of failure. Looking at Tony Walsh and thinking about everything he had witnessed over the past week, Zethkar made a choice that would define the rest of his existence. He could not stop Admiral Thexran from firing the Planet Killer, but he could give the humans a chance to stop it themselves. "Tony," he said quietly, "if I give you the access codes to our weapon systems, can your people disable the sterilization device?" The enhanced human studied him with eyes that seemed to see directly into his soul. "Why would you betray your own species?" "Because," Zethkar replied slowly, "I have seen what you are capable of when threatened. If even one human survives and escapes this planet, they will carry the knowledge of what happened here to other human worlds. Eventually, your enhanced descendants will hunt down every Velthari in the galaxy." Tony nodded grimly. "You're probably right. We don't forgive, we don't forget, and we never stop." Zethkar transmitted the access codes through Ray Campbell's communication network. Within minutes, enhanced human technicians were using the information to plan an assault on the flagship's primary weapon. They had 30 minutes to prevent the destruction of their world. The final battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Enhanced humans in captured Velthari ships assaulted the flagship with suicidal determination. They used ramming, attacks, close-range weapon strikes, and boarding actions that defied every principle of space combat. Amy Foster led a medical team that had somehow learned to use Velthari healing technology better than the aliens themselves. They kept wounded human pilots fighting long past the point where they should have been incapacitated. Dan Murphy coordinated chemical attacks using compounds he had developed from studying Velthari biology. His enhanced knowledge allowed him to create agents that could incapacitate entire ship crews without damaging the vessels themselves. Steve Johnson used his mechanical expertise to sabotage captured Velthari ships from the inside. He turned their own security systems against them and created cascading failures that disabled multiple vessels simultaneously. But it was Lisa Carter who made the difference, flying a heavily modified fighter that barely resembled its original design. She managed to penetrate the flagship's defenses and reach the primary weapon chamber. Her enhanced piloting skills allowed her to navigate through defensive fire that should have been impossible to survive. She crashed her ship directly into the Planet Killer's main power coupling. The explosion disabled the weapon permanently and sent massive power surges through the flagship systems. Lisa Carter died in the blast, but she saved her world and doomed the Velthari invasion. With their ultimate weapon destroyed and their fleet scattered, Admiral Thexaran had no choice but to order a complete retreat. The surviving Velthari ships fled toward the edge of the solar system, leaving behind hundreds of vessels and thousands of personnel. But the humans were not content with simple victory. The enhanced survivors immediately began reverse engineering captured Velthari technology on a massive scale. They wanted starships, weapons, and most importantly, the location of other Velthari worlds. Tony Walsh, finally released from captivity, found Zethkar as the last Velthari transports prepared to leave orbit. "You saved us by giving us those access codes. That makes you different from the rest of your kind." "Different how?" Zethkar asked. "You'll live long enough to see what we become," Tony replied. "The others won't be so lucky." As Zethkar fled Earth aboard one of the last evacuation ships, he watched human vessels beginning to leave the planet's atmosphere. They were already building a fleet using captured technology and enhanced engineering capabilities. Within months, maybe weeks, human ships would be heading toward Velthari space. He thought about everything he had witnessed. The ramming attack that started it all. The guerrilla warfare in the forest. The way humans adapted and improved under pressure. The biological weapon that had made them even more dangerous. The final battle where they chose victory over survival. Admiral Thexron's voice came over the communication system one last time. How did this happen? How did we lose to primitives? Zethkar looked back at the blue planet that was already beginning to swarm with human spacecraft. Enhanced humans who had learned Velthari technology and made it better. Warriors who fought harder when cornered. Predators who had been given the tools and motivation to hunt across the stars. "We didn't lose to primitives," he said quietly. "We lost to something much worse. We lost to humans." The day he battled with humans and witnessed real horror, Zethkar learned that there are some species in the universe that should never be threatened. Because when you threaten them, they don't just fight back. They evolve, they adapt, they become something that will hunt you to the ends of the galaxy. The age of human expansion had begun, and the Velthari Empire would be the first to learn what that meant.